Good evening, everyone. In the last session, we completed our programs related to methods. Are you able to practice the methods? Easy or difficult? Difficult. Methods are easy or difficult? Easy. Yes. Can you tell me in the oops as of now what we have discussed? We discussed about class. We discussed about object. We discussed about variables. We discussed about methods, right? So what is a class? What is a class? Class. It is a plan or model. It is a plan or model. It contains variables and methods. Class is a plan. It contains variables and methods. What is the object? What is the object? Physical entity. Object is called as a physical entity. What is the purpose of the object? It is used to store the data. Object is used to store the data. Then what is the purpose of variables? Object also used to store the data. Then why variables are required? Come on, guys. Object nothing but physical entity. Physical entity. What is the purpose of variables? Used to store the data. Used to store the data. That variable can hold a value or variable can hold one object also. Variables are used to store the data. What is the purpose of methods? To perform some operation, we are going to use methods. Methods are used to perform the operation. All right. In that, variables are divided into three types, guys. What are the three types of variables? One is instance variables, and the second one is static variables, and the third one is local variables. Instance variables, static variables, and local variables. What is the difference between instance, static, and local? Okay, this is inside class, outside method without static keyword, right? Without static keyword, inside the class, outside the method, without static keyword, we are going to write the variables. Those are called as instance variables. Then what about static variables? Inside class, outside method, inside class, outside method with a static keyword, we are going to write static variables. What about the local variables? Inside the method, we will call them as local variables. Okay, methods are used to perform the operation. How many types of methods available? Two types of methods available. Instance method is available and static method is also available. Instance method available, static method available. Instance method we will call by using object. We will call by using object. What about the static method? Static method we will call by using class name. We will call by using class name. Got it? When the memory will be allocated for the instance variables, when the object is created, when object created, memory will be allocated. When object created, memory will be allocated for instance variables. How many times object will be allocated? How many times memory will be allocated for instance variables? Come on, man. Multiple times, huh? In my class, there are two instance variables available. How many times memory will be allocated? My question is, how many times memory will be allocated for instance variables? Only one time. Depends on number of objects we create. If I created 10 objects, 10 times memory will be allocated. If I create 20 objects, 20 times memory will be allocated, because every object will maintain its own copy of the instance variable. If you create one object, one time memory will be allocated. If I create two objects, two times memory will be allocated. If I create three objects, three times memory will be allocated for instance variables. When object created, memory will be allocated for instance variables. Every object will maintain its own copy of instance variables. Every object will maintain its own copy of the instance variables. Then what about static variables? What about the static variables? Come on, guys. Static variables inside the class, outside the method with a static keyword. How many times memory will be allocated for static variables? When it will be allocated? When class is loaded. When class is loaded, then memory will be allocated for static variables. For static variables. How many times memory will be allocated for static variables? One time. When the class is loaded, only at that time memory will be allocated for static variables. What about the local variables? What about the local variables? When method is executed, then only memory will be allocated. When method executed, when method is invoked, then only memory will be allocated. Memory will be allocated for local variables. Initialization is mandatory or optional for the local variables. When it is mandatory, before using the local variable, we have to initialize the local variable. Before using local variable, we have to initialize that. But what about instance and static? What about the instance and static? No need. Why? If you don't initialize, then JVM will initialize with the default value. If you don't initialize, then JVM will initialize that with the default value. But for the local variable, we have to initialize the local variable before using that. But for the instance and static, initialization is optional. Initialization is optional. If you don't initialize, then JVM will initialize with the default value. Class is a plan or model. It contains variables and methods. Class is a plan or model. It contains variables and methods. Object is a physical entity. It is used to access variables and methods of the class. By using object, we can access the variables and we can access the methods of the class also if they are instance. If they are static, we can access by using class name. Static variables can be accessed by using class name. Static methods also can be accessed by using class name. What is the purpose of variables? Variables are used to store the data. Variables are divided into three types. Instance variables available, static variable available, local variable available. The variables which are declared inside the class and outside the method without static keyword are called as instance variables. Instance variables also called as global variable, also called as non-static variables. Whenever object is created, then memory will be allocated for instance variable. Every object will maintain its own copy of the instance variable. If you create 10 objects, 10 times memory will be allocated for the instance variable. If I create 20 objects, 20 times memory will be allocated for the instance variable. Okay, what about the static variable? Inside the class, outside the method, with the static keyword. If you create the variable, then it is called as a static variable. When class is loaded, then memory will be allocated for the static variable. What about the local variable? When method is invoked, then only memory will be allocated for local variable. Before using local variable, we have to initialize that. Before using local variable, we have to initialize the local variable. Then what about methods? What about the methods? Methods are used to perform some operation. Instance methods available and static methods available. Instance method we will call by using object, and static method we will call by using class name. Every method contains method declaration and method definition. What is the meaning of declaration and definition? Yes, method declaration and method definition. Method declaration nothing but signature. Method definition nothing but method body. Signature contains what values? Signature will contain return type plus name plus list of parameters. Method signature contains return type plus method name plus list of parameters. What is the body? Body contains logic. Inside the method body, we are going to write the logic. That means what operation that method has to perform, that we are going to write inside the method body. That is called logic. That is called as logic. Now, can I take primitive data type as a method parameter and return type? Can I take primitive type as a parameter and return type? Is it valid void m1 into I? Yes or no? Yes, I can take primitive type as a parameter. Can I take object as a parameter, object as a return type? Yes, you can take object also as a parameter, object also as a return type. When to go for object as a parameter? When you want to supply group of values at a time, then we can go for object as a parameter. Can I pass multiple objects as a parameter? Yes, by using array, you can take multiple objects also as a parameter. When to go for method return type? When we need a return type for the method? When after performing the operation, after the logic got executed, our method should return some value. Can I return one int value from the method? Can I return string value? Can I return one object? Can I return object array? Yes. How to understand which return type I need to take? Requirement. Based on the requirement, we need to understand what signature we need to take and what body we need to write. Based on the requirement, we need to think and we need to write the logic for the method. What is the parameter? What is the return type? What is the logic? What we need to write, that you need to decide based on the requirement. Can you buttify the signature of the methods? Will not work out, because for every requirement, method will be different. Method signature will be different. Method body will be different. Got it? Yes. Read this once again. Whatever we have studied in the last 1 week of time. Last 1 week, कब start हुआ? Oops. Deepavali पहले. Almost more than a week. Yes. Read it, all of you. Class is a plan or model. It contains variables and methods. Object is an entity which is used to access instance variables and instance methods of the class. Variables are used to store the data. Read this. Completed? Yeah. Read this. Huh? 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 Variables. Yes, they will be stored in the stack. Whenever the method is executed or when the class is in the method area, they will store first because all the class code is storing in the method area. Sorry, static variables will be stored in the method area because they are part of the class code, right? They will store in the method area, not in the stack. Local variables will store in the stack. So that static variables will be stored in the method area. Completed? Good. Fine. Next, let me take one class. Student. Okay. I have taken a class called student. Inside the student class, integer ID, string name, integer age, and a string gender. Okay. I have 4 variables. These variables are static variables or instance variables. These variables are instance variables which I have declared inside the class and outside the method. Next one, let us go for main method. Let us go for main method. Can I access id is equal to, can I directly access like this? Id is equal to 102? No. Why? Instance variable should be accessed by using object. Did I create the object or I have not created the object? No. When the memory will be allocated for the instance variable, when the object is created, then only memory will be allocated for instance variable. Can you tell me how to create the object? Can I do like this? Student Raju is equal to new student. Student Raju is equal to new student. Now, can I do like this? Raju dot ID is equal to 101. Raju dot name is equal to some Raju, and Raju dot age is equal to some 20, and Raju dot gender is equal to male. Is it valid? So what I have done now? I have created one object. Using that object, I have initialized instance variables of the class. When the object is created, then memory will be allocated for the instance variable. Using that object, I have initialized the instance variables of the class. Now, can I create one more object? Can I create one more object? Student Rani is equal to new student. Rani dot ID is equal to some 102, and Rani dot name is equal to Rani, then Rani dot age is equal to some 22 and Rani dot gender is equal to female. Okay, is it valid? How many objects I have created? Two objects. How many times memory allocated for instance variables? Two times. Four variables available. First, when the Raju object created, memory allocated for the four variables. When the Rani object created, memory allocated for the four variables. Perfect. Suppose now object I am creating and I am initializing the values for the variables. How many objects I have initialized? Two objects I have initialized. Now I want to represent all the students who are available in the offline class. How many objects I need to create? How many times I need to initialize the variables? How many objects I need to create now? Number of students available. How many times I need to initialize the variables? Number of students. Now almost there are 50 to 60 people available in the offline. 50 objects I have to create and 50 times I need to initialize the four variables. So how many lines of code I need to write? How many lines of code I need to write? 60 people are there. 60 lines just to create the object. 60 into 4. Right, so many lines of code I need to write just to initialize the variables. Are you guys getting my point? So my program lines, the number of lines of code is going to increase. But today, just for offline, I want to create the objects. Every student having a different name, different age. Okay, I have to initialize all the values for every student. Only for offline 60 members are there. If I take online also, 120 people are available. 120 plus 60, 180 objects I have to create. If I create 180 objects, how many times memory will be allocated for the instance variables? 180 times memory will be allocated for the instance variable. 180 students having the different names, different age, different gender, different ID. For every student, 4 lines. 180 into 4. 720 lines of code I have to write to represent all the students belongs to my class. Is it easy? Is it recommended? No. This is not the recommended way to initialize the instance variables of the class. If I follow this approach, 750 lines of code I have to write. Are you guys getting my point? 180 students are available. 180 lines I have to write only to create the object, and 720 lines I need to write to initialize. 720 plus 180. 900 lines of code I have to write in my program. Will you recommend that? So if I go to my Java project batch, 300 people are available. Then how many lines of code I need to write? 1500 lines of code I have to write to represent the students. Is it recommended? No. That's where constructors came into picture. Understood? So now if you want to initialize the variables, you don't need to write like this. If you write like this, the number of lines of the code is going to increase. Easily we can initialize instance variables of the class in the single line by using constructor. What is the purpose of constructor? Katam. Constructor is used to initialize instance variables of the class. That's it. Simple. We already know what is a class. We already know what is a variable. We know what is initialization. What is a class? Come on. Class is a plan or model which represents variables and methods. What is the purpose of variables? Variables are used to store the data. Now my class is having 4 instance variables I want to represent all the students available in the class. For every student, one object will be created. 4 properties are available. Create one object, initialize the properties. Create second object, initialize the properties. Create the third object, initialize the properties. Create the 90th object, initialize the properties. The lines of code is going to increase. Okay. Initializing the variables for all the students is a lengthy process. Number of lines of code is going to increase. To overcome this problem, Java provided one concept, one beautiful concept available in the Java, which is called constructor, which is called as constructor. What is constructor? Why we need to go for constructor? And how to work with the constructor, that we have to understand. What is our next topic? Constructor. Now observe, first I will write some points about the constructor, then we will work with that. Constructor, it is a special method in Java. It is a special method in Java which is used to initialize current class variables, current class instance variables. Got my